higher resolution than it would fit in the frame. So, for example, this image consists of multiple tiles, HDR, multiple HDR panorama tiles. So I take like 5 brackets with the camera in portrait mode, I pan it around, take another 5, and so on. So the problem with any kind of multi-shot photography technique is that decisive moment when everything kind of comes into place, and one thing, maybe, I don't know, a bird flying across, that could make or break the composition. So how do you do that when you're dealing with multi-shot photography, especially HDR? And that's what I was trying to figure out. And this is the approach that I've come across, which is basically, so this morning I thought for the demonstration, given that we didn't have any windows in these rooms, I thought, okay, I should do something outside. So I went around central London hunting for a place where I could record this. And I finally, the Shard caught my eye. I went up to the Shard and taking advice from another photographer, his blog, I didn't pay 30 quid to get up to the viewing gallery. It was closed anyway. I went for a £5 cup of coffee at the cafe. So this is me.
Hi, my name is Rehan here, and I'm demonstrating Rehan's zone system, which is a workflow I've developed for HDR photography in order to be able to capture the decisive moment in the scene. That is difficult to do with multi-shot photography. So in this case, if I were to try and get everything across the landscape in sharp focus and use an aperture, maybe f16, it would give me a lot of diffraction, but at the same time the motion of the trains would be blurred. So at f16 it's giving me a speed, a shutter speed of 15th of a second, whereas at f2.8, which I'm using just to focus or just to frame the foreground element, the train tracks here, it's giving me a shutter speed of 2/50th of a second and f2.8 ISO 100. And so what I'm trying, or what I'm going to try and do is, I like the way the tracks are diverging, so I will try and photograph the trains kind of converging as they meet down the tracks. And so for me that would be an interesting composition. And once I have that, I'm going to then photograph the remainder of the scene. So I think maybe here, so that's an interesting composition, I think, with the trains going up and down the track. I'm not here to take a perfect picture. So I've panned the camera across. This is just a demonstration, not the perfect picture. So pan the camera across. I'm making sure there are no other moving elements in the foreground, so I'm keeping a close watch on how, if there are any other moving elements, making sure that they don't overlap with the pictures that I've taken already too much. So just for coverage, I'm taking more pictures here. And now I'm going to tilt the camera up. And what I want here is basically everything from the bridge to the horizon to be sharp. Now, I'm not too worried about the ambient motion blur, for example, with the sky and the Thames water. So at this point, I can actually change my aperture and use something like maybe f11, which will give me sufficient depth of field to have everything from the bridge to the horizon in sharp focus. So I'm looking at the horizon here, And obviously the shutter speed will need to change. So 15th of the second. And I'm going to pan the camera across, making sure I've got at least between 50 to 25% overlap between one frame to the next. And making sure the camera is level. And one more shot. So I'm taking 3 exposures, 2 stops apart, and this allows me to have sufficient depth of field, having combined all the focus types together. I will have wider coverage in terms of framing given the panorama tiles that I've taken, and with higher dynamic range I will have more latitude in terms of post-production to push and pull image pixel values around. So it does give me a lot of latitude during post-production, more coverage in terms of framing of the scene, and everything is basically in sharp focus from foreground elements through to the background. Thank you for watching.
Cool. So that was me. It's really difficult to multitask, to actually take the pictures and talk about them at the same time. I do apologize for that.
When did you film that?
This morning.
Okay.
Yes. So, to post-production then. So these are the images, right? Let's go over to, right. So these are the different pictures. The set that I actually ended up using, I've got it here in green. Right. So with HDR, sorry. Okay, computer can't keep pace with me. So this is basically, this is the base exposure, right? And this is 2/50th of a second at f2.8. So the depth of field is quite shallow. It's enough to cover this region, but you can see in the corner things start to go out of focus, right? So I'm just using f2.8 for this area. What that allows me to do is actually use a much faster shutter speed. So 2/50th of a second. Had I been using f16 and photographed the entire thing as a whole, the shutter speed, the base shutter speed I was getting was 15th of a second, right? Which meant with the trains it was giving me a lot of motion blur, relatively more than what I was getting at 2/50th. And considering, you can see there, okay, and considering that I'm doing HDR and I need to take multiple exposures, that motion blur again can create a lot of problems, ghosting issues. So this is basically the first framing, and then I pan the camera across. Sorry, there. So I pan the camera across, take another set of pictures, pan the camera across to the other side, take 3 shots. I'm not changing any of the camera settings here. I'm literally just panning it across. Then I tilt it up. I change the aperture to f11 because here the water is not moving so fast, and I'm not too worried about the water or the motion blur in the water or the clouds when they're that far in the midground or background. There can be, if it's too extreme, there can be discrepancies in motion blur, which can be an issue. So you can have the aperture the same, or you can change it depending on the needs of the picture. So again, now I've panned the camera across, still photographing at f11, haven't changed anything all the settings are exactly the same. And I've done 3 shots panning the camera across. And then I combine the images together. And what do I get? I get
Big reveal.
the big reveal. I get this. Look at that. Right? Do you see any problems?
How does the train look up close?
Sorry?
How does that train look?
Yes, good call. So remember what I said about that I was making sure there wasn't any other movement. So I was watching the other side, and this train happened to arrive, which threw everything out of sync. So I had to go and actually, I'll tell you exactly which exposures these are.
You've got the only moving Thames Link train that's
So I was playing around with this, and then as I was trying to get more of this building here, these 2 trains appeared out of nowhere. I was